What's up, everybody? Welcome back to HR Heretics. Today we have Siadhal Magos, the CEO of Metaview, on the pod. And I'm super excited to have this conversation because I have been pretty outspoken that I think AI has come to many other areas of the organization, but it has not really come to the HR and talent orgs. And we were having a conversation with Heather Doche, who's at Signalfire. And I made this comment to her, and Heather was like, well, you should really check out Metaview. So I want to start with that and tell us a little bit about Metaview and tell us about how you guys are actually using AI today to make recruiting teams more effective.
Yeah, totally. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on. I think you guys are doing amazing work with the pod. So yeah, congrats for that. And thanks again. So Metaview is an AI scribe for recruiting. So there's a very basic and sort of prominent problem it solves for, well, thousands, tens of thousands of recruiters, which is a lot of the time, if you're a recruiter, one of the reasons you either get into that game or stay in that game is because you like people and you like meeting new people and you think you've got a way with people. Yeah, a lot of the time we ask recruiters to spend their time meeting people, i.e. candidates, really just extracting data and capturing it, to writing down that data. It makes it really hard to have a great conversation, and actually makes it really hard for you to show up and be a great consultant and coach for the hiring team. So what Metaview is really good at is summarizing your recruiting conversations for you in a way that's really empathetic to the job that you want to get done after the call. Like, hey, update this hiring manager, or update this rec, or attend this debrief to discuss these 3 candidates, and making sure we extract that information in a way that's really, really helpful for you so that you don't have to do it. And yeah, recruiters totally love it. Hiring managers love it too, especially those folks who are trying to scale their team. So that's what it does right now.
That's really cool. We're in this kind of early era of AI, and you've been at company building now for 6 years. So when did AI, and was AI actually like always what we wanted to do in the future? Or did you see that with the AI revolution, that's when things really started to change for the company?
Both. So we've always been, we're an AI company. It's in our DNA, the way we thought we were going to solve. So if you take a step back, I talked about what the product is right now, which is this AI scribe built particularly for recruiting, integrates with your workflow, helps you with hiring decisions, all these sorts of things. The founding insight was a little bit more general than that, which was actually there's a ton of data within hiring conversations. Let's just talk about interviews specifically. There's a ton of data within these interviews, yet we're capturing very, very little of it. Like, I would go as far to say is less than 1% of all of the data that is really in those conversations are we really capturing. And so the founding insight was, can we change that? And the way we thought we were going to solve that was with AI. And so what we started to do back in, when we started the company in 2018 was, of course, we had transcription and those sorts of things that we used off-the-shelf products for, but we were actually labeling the data ourselves. So we were trying to build up our own corpus of data in order to be able to build a model ourselves that was going to help people with how they interviewed and how to get the best out of those conversations. So that was always the approach. At the time when GPT 3.5 came out, it felt like for a split second, it felt like a bit of a punch in the face. Like, holy shit, we've been building up this data asset. It turns out we didn't need any of, we don't, that's not as valuable as we thought it was, because actually these LLMs are incredibly good at summarization in particular. So, but very quickly we realized this was a great thing for us, because it actually means you could, some of the things that we thought were maybe 5 years down our roadmap, and after raising tons and tons of money, we might be able to do them one day. Suddenly, no, you can do them right away. So it's amazing for us, amazingly for our customers as well. But we've always had that in mind, that essentially the big theme here is, in a world where you have I suppose, really powerful intelligence at your disposal, suddenly unstructured data is useful. And that's essentially what conversations are. In business, most of your data is actually unstructured. We have a bunch of processes historically to force people to structure that data. It's called filling in a form, which is basically what you do in an ATS or even a CRM or your HRIS, filling in forms. That's our way of forcing people to structure the information they have. That's essentially going to go away. We're going to take this unstructured data, and we might want to look at it this way on day one. 3 years later, we might want to look back at that data in a different way, and we're not going to ask people to rewrite it. We're just going to be able to evoke the data out of it using our tooling. And so we always had that in mind. It's just that suddenly we became right when OpenAI launched GPT 3.5.
I remember reading about that, Sayel, and remember, I think it was your co-founder saying this just came out. It just pivoted a bit, but accelerated what we're trying to do a
Yeah.
ton. And, I think, and I'd love both of your thoughts on this. I haven't really seen a lot of HR folks are talking about AI at a high level, but to Nolan's point, I haven't really seen it kind of in the wild yet as far as like radically changing how we do business. This is the first, I think, time I've actually seen it was something I can touch and feel. And you're very smart, Sayal, very, very descriptive. I think for me, for those of you listening, like I literally saw for the first time today, I was looking at the product and it's like you can literally just type in, tell me what this candidate said about their motivations and get an answer. Like that to me was like, wait, what? I don't have to have 8 debriefs and read 18 million documents and remember stuff. I literally can just, in a sense, your chat GPT for this process.
Yep.
Yeah, let me just jump in really fast, Al, because I totally agree with Kelli that my take on it is this is the first product in the talent space that is actually delivering utility to the hiring teams as well as the recruiting teams. And Kelli's example is like, hey, we're about to extend an offer. What did the candidate say that like motivates them? And this is such a you guys do an amazing job of the video of this. And instead of like me scanning every single interview, scorecard, I can instead just type that in and the AI goes and finds it for me. And now we have that thing in a fraction of the time so we can move faster.
Yeah. I have a question, Saya. Like, so you were Uber, right? And your co-founder was
Mhm.
Palantir. And I remember reading the pain, right? You remembered this like visceral pain in the ass process and these things. Like, can you just describe like back in the heyday? Sorry if it's traumatizing to you. What was that? Like, what was so brutal about that? Where you're like, we should build Metaview.
I'll probably like pushback is the wrong phrase, but for me, it wasn't brutal. For me, it was just like disappointingly eye rolly. Yeah, gonna like get involved in this hiring decision. Like was it because you did not feel as empowered and enabled and as informed as you did about my day-to-day product decisions. The biggest thing that sort of really sort of impressed upon me when I joined Uber, I was at a startup before, was literally the infrastructure and the tooling that I had as a PM that I could deploy, new features to drivers, in different corners of the globe, get a report back overnight around how that experiment went. And that I just felt like I, had like the sort of Iron Man suit on as a product manager. Yet when it came to interviewing, it was really there was a bunch of like manual and analog infrastructure around trying to do hiring better than other companies, of course, because obviously, because we took it so seriously. But it still came down to things that weren't truth seeking, and truth seeking was a really big thing at Uber. But you'd inevitably have things coming into play like, okay, well that person is the bar raiser, and I don't know why they're the bar raiser because I've actually been in their interviews and they're terrible at interviewing. But they're saying that that's a good candidate, and actually I'm working on this project with that person, and I disagreed with them last week. So do I really want to disagree with them again? And that's the type of thing that seeps into your decision making in a world where you don't actually have access to information. So that it was more like an eye roll. It wasn't brutal. It was like, okay, I theoretically and academically know these are really important decisions. And still, when I reflect back on my time at Uber now, there are people that I either hired as the hiring manager or were part of their interview loops who are still there 5 or 6 years later. So that my biggest impact by far at Uber was in doing the work that led to those people joining the company. So I still know that that's the most impactful thing you can do, but the process just, was not really getting the best out of anyone. So it was less brutal, more eye-rolly. To give sort of two particular stories, one is what I mentioned around this when I got interviewed at Uber. I obviously went through the bar raiser process. I'm sure many of the folks listening to this know what that is, but essentially where you have like a smaller pool of highly trusted interviewers in the company who are supposed to be like culture carriers and make sure that anyone who joins the company is good enough, basically. And my bar raiser interview was by far the lowest quality interview of all the interviews that I was subjected to. And I didn't think much of it at the time, and by that, what I mean is the person dominated the conversation. It was not a taxing interview for me at all. It was super easy. And but later on, as I got to know sort of the machinations, you realize, well, people just become bar raisers because they ask someone, it's not because everyone knows this is the best picker or this is the person who gets the best out of people it's just they ask, can I be it? Okay, yeah, you are. It's just like it's BS. So that was one that really resonates with me. And the other one that really stayed with me as well was good, I guess, a positive experience, which was first couple of times where I was involved in interview, you obviously go through all the training and everything. And I turned up for a debrief, and a little bit, I look back at that one. It was a little bit almost like glib and just like sharing my thoughts and my opinions on the person, which obviously I do think is a portion of what you should share, of course. But then it was contrasted with one of the data scientists who was also on the interview, and he gave this really thoughtful, evidence-based, this is where I think they'll succeed. If we do hire them, these will be some of the risks we need to consider this. And I was like, okay, that's the way it should be. And it's probably unrealistic to ask everyone to be as thoughtful and as, data-driven sort of out of the gate as that person. But if we can get to a world where there's more of that, that would be pretty great. And it obviously was a chastening experience for me because I was a little bit embarrassed in how I sort of showed up on that debrief. So point is, it was left to luck. That person was a great interviewer and was great at sort of contributing to hiring decisions. A bunch of other people around the table often weren't. It was just luck because there was no transparency.
So I worked at Google, and I remember they did this massive study, which I believe had like 10,000 different interviewers that they looked at. And what they were trying to do was to find correlation between interview performance and on-job performance.
Mm-hmm.
And they found one person, one interviewer that actually had correlation. And this study has been reproduced now a few times to where I think Kelli and I share a very similar take that interviews are broken. And so talk to me about how you think software and AI are going to solve that problem and ultimately get us to more of a science-based approach in hiring, to where we actually are hiring the best person versus the best interviewer.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, one of the pods of yours that I listened to was when you talked about the MEI topic, i.e. after the Scale AI announcement. One sort of way to think about how we get hiring outcomes that we're not happy with, or we reflect back on and say that was not a good decision, is because there was bias present in there. Where is the time where bias is most pernicious? I would say bias is pernicious when you use biases as shortcuts. And you use shortcuts when you either don't have enough information. So like, well, I don't have the information, so I'm just going to have to like use a shortcut. I'll use a shortcut like the college they went to or the company they used to work at, or, in the worst case scenario, like the sports team they support, something silly like that. Or when you're really under time pressure. And so that happens a lot in hiring, right? Because you have this upstream problem in the first like 3 or 4 weeks of trying to hire someone, where actually the calibration is not there. So you don't really know what you're looking for as a hiring manager, which I think is a really interesting topic to jam on if we get the chance as well. So you're almost forced to this point, unless you're a very experienced hiring manager, where you're essentially now under a time pressure. And at the same time, you don't actually have a lot of information on these people, because interviews, much as I actually think interviews are a great way to extract signal and understand chemistry and all of those sorts of things during a essentially what is a courting or like a matchmaking process with a candidate, you don't have access to most of that information, unless you use messaging, of course. You don't have access to most of that information by the time you get to the decision. So you end up relying on biases. So that's why I think maybe a lot of hiring decisions historically have been as good as a coin flip. So that's one thing. I'd say that's probably the biggest. The other thing I would say, though, is it's always like, so what? Like, even if it is the case that there's no such thing as a good interviewer or a good picker or something like that, does it matter if that's the expectation of everyone on all sides, to meet people and talk with them before you decide to join that company? I think that is expected on candidate side. I think that will continue to grow in terms of how important that is to them. That's a very important thing in hiring someone, is you want the hiring manager committed to that person's success, because that's the only chance that you're going to make it so. And so what modality do we have as human beings for getting me as a hiring manager to care about you and to think that I want you in my team? It's going to be conversations. If we try and reverse engineer and create something else, I think, we're sort of like solving a problem that doesn't exist. That is how we're going to do it. So I think it's a really good, I think it is a good data point. I think we should try and get to the point where we have better correlation between obviously interviewers and quality of the hiring decisions and that sort of thing, of course. But in a way, it's sort of like, well, that's how we interact as human beings. So that's the way it's going to be.
Hey everyone, we'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
Your workforce is both your organization's greatest strength and largest single cost. With Planful, it's easy to unlock the secrets of successful workforce planning so you and your HR team can make the right business decisions. Imagine using data-driven insights to develop accurate forecasts, close hiring gaps, and adjust talent acquisition plans collaboratively based on costs today and into the future. Planful lets you collaborate with colleagues in finance to understand the value your employees bring to the table. And the best part, you can get started with Planful in just weeks with minimal help from IT. Plus, with Planful, you get an endless runway. Planful grows with you, no matter how fast or large your team scales.
Ready to transform your HR strategy? Join over 1,500 organizations worldwide who trust Planful as their go-to workforce planning software at planful.com/heretics.
Here's a crazy stat. Between hybrid and frontline employees, about 80% don't typically work in an office. So it's no surprise that digitally engaging employees is the number one concern for CEOs as companies go hybrid. But as hybrid is quickly becoming the norm, it's easy for workplaces to start feeling a little less human. Yet delighting a digital workforce is possible, and it can even be, dare we say, fun. That's where WorkVivo, Zoom's employee experience platform, comes in. If you've ever recoiled at the thought of a static intranet that looks like something you built in 1995 using MS Paint, have no fear. WorkVivo is a dynamic, intuitive, accessible, and mobile-first tool. People actually like using it, which is why companies like Ryanair, Dollar General, Virgin, and more have rolled it out to hundreds of thousands of employees. WorkVivo's activity feeds, spaces, shoutouts, and live streams, among other features, help elevate the employee experience like never before. The result? Dramatically better retention, productivity, and most importantly, connectedness. A greater sense of the belonging we all crave at work, whether we sit at a desk or drive a truck. Make WorkVivo the digital heart of your organization and achieve limitless human connection. Head to workvivo.com to book a demo and make sure you tell them that Nolan and Kelli from HR Heretics sent you. Yeah, and I think my point is like, one of the things that I've learned is even everyone now has the understanding that interviews are very imperfect. Yet there is no desire or movement to like kill the interview. Like it's going to be that way, maybe with some tweaks and some add-ons here. And Kelli and I've talked a bit about this in the past, but like clearly interviewing is still going to be part of the way that we meet candidates. And so I'm excited about a solution that makes this better. The other thing I'll add is I think the quality of hire discussion has been a topic that I've been thinking about since like 2014. And, even today, I think people are making slightly better attempts at tying interview performance to on-the-job performance, but it's still very cumbersome to do so. And as just a believer in data, and a believer in like the only way we can actually learn is if we reflect and we take a step back and we look at like what we thought initially and compare our thinking back then to what we actually now witness with data on the job performance. Doing that is a pain in the ass today. And I just for me, like as somebody who's been in talent my entire career, we've all kind of been waiting for something to like help us solve this problem. And this is like what we should be leveraging software for anyways. Like that's always been my take.
Yeah. I mean, do you both think that software can really take over this whole thing? Because like we're almost in 2026. I started at Hired, right? From Hired Siadhal back in 2016. It was the jam. It was like, we're going to match candidates with opportunities, literally, hopefully without a human, right? And I remember one of the founders saying, one day, you're not going to interview ever again. The perfect person is just going to show up on your doorstep from like a stork or something. And I was going toe to toe. I was like, you're out of your mind. Like we can automate, we can software this to a point, but there is no way in hell you can fully take humans out of this process. And here we are almost 10 years later, and we have great tools like Metaview. However, I'm not saying you both are saying this, but I don't think that the human element can ever be taken out of this unless, of course, we all turn into robots.
I am definitely not saying that, to be clear. I strongly agree with you, Kelli. One thing, just to go back to the quality of hire point, Nolan, I'm not sure if that was inherent in what you're saying as well, is obviously the problem with quality of hire is who's to say, do you trust the managers who are giving the appraisals? So I think obviously quality of hire in its essence is what it's all about, but there is a degree of we tend to focus with our customers actually on the shorter term measures around, well, did we get people in seat, and did we, are we happy with them? Do we have higher off acceptance rates? Do we get them in quickly, and all these things, and sort of trusting the process, as it were, that it has good outcomes. You can only really look at that on a more superior basis. Anyway, but to come to your point, Kelli, no, I think I just think conversations are just like a very sort of central part of being human. So if we get to a world where no job is being done by humans anymore, then yes, of course, we probably won't be interviewing the AIs that are coming in to do the job for us. But that's like a completely different world that none of us, maybe only a few companies on the planet, are designing for, certainly not Metaview. So I think for as long as, we're talking about populating our companies with human beings, conversations are going to be a massive part of it. And I'm a big disbeliever, actually, in the idea that as a candidate, for example, you would have a conversation with a personified AI. I don't think that will happen, as in it might happen in sort of corner cases for certain roles, but by and large, it's not going to be the way that things go. I actually think it's the opposite. I think the conversation is going to come more and more important. I think it's going to be increasingly maybe the only differentiator you have in how you recruit the best talent. What is the job of a recruiter? The job of a recruiter, it's not obviously the set of tasks that people tend to do as recruiters now. The task would certainly change. With the job of a recruiter is to get great people into the company as quickly as possible. And for as long as you have two companies that are competing for this limited supply of great candidates, they're all going to be thinking, how do I get alpha? How do I get competitive advantage in hiring that candidate? And some of the company's answers to that is going to be, well, I'm going to put a human in that loop because I think that human can affect, either because we unearth something that someone else doesn't, or because we convince them to join our company because we create a human connection with them. And the name of that person, the job title of that person is going to be recruiter. So that's what I think. I think it's increasingly, these conversations are essentially the central tenet of being a recruiter, whether that's like running the conversations yourself, or whether that's doing that plus creating the environment for other people to have really meaningful conversations. Conversations are just the way that humans connect, aren't they? If there was another way, I guess I'd be saying that, but really that's what conversations are.
I love that, Say. I mean, we've talked a lot about AI is not going to replace people, but the work people are going to do are going to change. They're not going to be hands anymore that push the process through and take the notes and push the hiring managers to put the notes in and check the box. They're going to be the brains that architect what the best and the most differentiated experiences are. And that's why I love Metaview, because I can remember so many times people trying to find notes and arguing over who said what and trying to remember. And it's like, now we can actually chat about like the bigger things, not what enables those bigger conversations and fooling around with that. But I do have a question, and maybe it's, a little bit of a zinger, but I'm sure in the product you all built and what it does, you've bumped up against some type of barriers, what legal barriers, right? Bias barriers, right? What are the risks of, right, these interview notes being off or wrong or misrepresented, right? I think we have to legally keep notes for 2 years or something like that. Like what do the lawyers say as far as like, wait, this might be tough, or was it easy? Were there no speed bumps?
We're still on the adoption curve. We're still relatively early, right? We had I would say our innovators first half, or maybe first 3 quarters of last year. I think now we're getting into the sort of the early adopters and maybe even towards some early majority, but it's still like, you're still on the first half of that curve for sure. So obviously, as a business, when we're running up and talking with potential customers who we suspect are going to be really hard to sell to, because they're going to have a lot of these questions, which are good questions to have, and obviously a lot of our customers do have the questions. Our sense is that their propensity is to think the business value is worth it. Then we obviously don't spend a ton of time with them. So the point is, those are legitimate concerns. Lots of businesses value data deniability. Like, if there's no data about this, then you can't prove it. So therefore, let's not capture the data. Those are obviously not the types of customers we're trying to win right now. The types of customers we're trying to win right now are companies who think, the more data we have, the more likely we are to win. And of course, the more leveraged our people are and not spending time on grunt work, essentially, the more likely we are to win as well. So it comes up for sure. So to talk to the specific legal concerns, accuracy is not really a problem, just because transcription is better than human quality. So that's like very easily, like, everyone understands that. It's becoming more and more normalized to capture meetings in general, and people are very aware that this is really high quality now, like better than human. When it comes to summarization, obviously there is some, the aim of our product, or part of the aim of our product, is to pull out the essence. What's the most important thing the candidate shared? And so obviously what's really important is for us to suck up as much data from the company as possible. Like, well, what question were they asking? Therefore, what information the candidate shared is most relevant? Because I don't want to leave out something important. what does the rubric for the role say? What does the scorecard say? What does the job description say? And so there's a bunch of inputs that you can get, again, to the point where you're outperforming a human trying to summarize the most important things by like 10x. So yeah, people have questions about it, but it's definitely a task where you're putting yourself on the right side of the, it sounds a bit grandiose, but it's like the right side of history to be doing this rather than leaving it to humans who are obviously doing a terrible job at it. So yeah, it's not too much of a problem.
Yeah, and I'll go to your question around, Kelly, what does AI look like? And our friend David Hanrahan had a post a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn asking this question. I thought about it, and my current take is it's actually exactly what Siadhal said earlier. Is I think AI is going to make us like the Iron Man suit. Like humans are still going to be, underneath the thing, but we're just going to be so much more capable and so much more leveraged and have so much more power in the future. And, I think a lot about how cumbersome it is if you're a head of talent at an organization that has more than even 50 people. You can't be in every interview. Things are just going like it's still kind of the Wild West, even though you do interviewer trainings and you brief interviewers and then they get in there and it's just like shit is flying everywhere. And sometimes you don't even know until the candidate, writes a negative review on Glassdoor or something. Right. And then you're caught with your pants down of what the hell happened here? And that has entirely been my experience, which is just, you could do everything possible to prep people and it's still not going to be enough. There are going to be people who slip through the cracks and don't do things the way that we want. And that's where I really think AI, it's almost I think the best analogy is going to be the bumpers of a bowling lane. Keeping these interviewers on the lane versus going super crazy, asking really biased questions, going off in a never land, over talking and not listening to what the candidate actually has to tell us. There's just so many ways where interviews go wrong that I think AI can help in the future. Yeah. Siadhal, you agree with that?
Strongly. And I think there's an and then, which is more around what does AI enable you to do when you have a large set of data that you didn't have. So basically what you're describing, I'll say, when you talk about these bumpers, the bumpers on a bowling alley, that's starting to use AI rather than for automation of certain things, which is, I'd say, primarily the reason people love Metaview is it's automating something I don't want to do. And great, Metaview does that for you. Everyone's happy. What you're describing is what I would say is the next sort of phase, which I think is happening also now and will continue to happen for the next few months and years, which is around detection. How can I detect that? I was never on all these meetings. There was always shit happening I didn't want to happen. And now I can be aware of this and do something about it. And maybe I'll do something about it, or maybe the AI will do something about it. We'll have an agreement, or I'll configure it in the way that I want to make sure that things happen. And that's tactical. I mean, that's a good thing, to be clear. I'm not one of those people who thinks tactical is a bad word. Tactical is great. Tactical is great. But there are some next level things that you can start to do with that detection as well, actually starting to observe trends that, might be to do with your comp philosophy. Okay, we have this data that says our comp bands are, that we think we're paying at the 75th centile. But actually, it turns out over the last 6 months, every software engineer we've spoken to in this location for this role has said that their comp expectations are here. And I don't go and ask everyone every single time after every single interview, what did they say? I just get my AI scribe, Metaview, to send me a report every week to show me where the needle's moving. And this is obviously not the same data as verified compensation data, but it's still really interesting data. This is what people are saying. And you can think about that across all of the strategic problems you have, whether you're as a HR function, a TA function, it could be as a leadership function. What are people, is all this bad press we're getting actually coming up in our interviews? How do we deal with it? Are we you can really start to push the boat out in terms of that detection on a thematic level. That I think will also mean that you're not just giving recruiters this Iron Man suit, you're giving anyone who really cares about the talent that's in their company powers they didn't have before.
And I remember us doing that.
Thesis too.
What you just described, Siadhal, we were doing that 5 years ago through, oh my gosh, here's a shared Google sheet. What are you all hearing? Get in there. I mean, 100%.
Well, and you don't even believe that sheet. That's actually been my experience, is you put that sheet together and they're like, oh, the recruiters are inflating it. I've had that exact experience. It's actually, we record these now. Would you like to see the transcripts?
Well, I believe my recruiters, Nolan. I don't know who you're talking about.
No, I believe my recruiters, but then it goes up to leadership, and it's just always these straw man arguments that are so obnoxious. because especially comp is like, the hot topic issue on like all of these things.
Right. But to Sal's point, like there's so much stuff out there. Comp is one of them, other things, but there's so much stuff out there where, right, real street market value versus what you're getting it from Radford or these freaking things. That street value information, like even competitive information that they share with you in interviews, like that is the real thing. And we spend a lot of time still chasing those things. So it could be hiring related or it could be a lot of other things.
Hey everyone, we'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Real talk, most talent leaders haven't yet cracked how to leverage AI for meaningful impact on their hiring processes and business goals. But the leaders who are effectively using AI to transform their recruiting team's efficiency and quality use Metaview. Metaview is the AI assistant for the interview process. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations, like intakes, interviews, and debriefs, then provides perfectly summarized notes of everything that was discussed. That means your people can focus on creating human connections with candidates during calls and save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. But it's so much more than just a time saver, because perfect notes means perfect data. For every candidate in every pipeline, hiring teams can make confident, informed decisions, and talent leaders can finally take control of the interview process. Join forward-thinking talent leaders at high-performing organizations like Brex, HelloFresh, and Quora, and check out Metaview. Head over to metaview.ai/heretics to talk to one of Metaview's product experts, or get started for free. You'll be up, running, and AI-enabled in minutes.
This episode is brought to you by Warp. If you're a founder with employees in multiple states, you know managing state tax compliance is complicated. Warp not only automates state tax compliance, but also offers a user-friendly experience tailored to the needs of startups with a robust in-house team of experts. Warp ensures your startup remains compliant across all 50 states, giving you the peace of mind you need to focus on scaling your business. They also make it easy for startups to provide health benefits for employees, hire international contractors, and even claim R&D tax credits. Hundreds of startups trust Warp to handle their payroll and compliance needs. You can go from zero to payroll live in just 2 days. Don't let payroll and compliance hold your startup back. Visit joinwarp.com/peel or tap the link in the description. Get started and receive a $1,000 gift card when you run your very first payroll. That's joinwarp.com/peel.
If you're talking at scale as well. So it's obviously, if you're capturing this data around compensation expectations, you're finding yourself having an offer acceptance issue, especially around these people who communicated expectations that were higher. And then you're also seeing the company they go on to join. You can also start to fuse these real insights and, again, just present much more compelling cases for example, changing your compensation strategy than you could before. So again, that's not the primary use case people have for Metaview, but really what I think is a big part of how we'll start to think about these systems is we'll very soon start to break down the immediacy of the value. Immediate value is great, but people also start to learn, wow, there's real nuggets of information here that can give us a strategic advantage in how we hire, that we're not sort of seeing. It's only the most forward-thinking companies are doing that right now.
Totally. So, Siadhal, you're selling into talent teams. Today is July 17th, 2024. At maybe like one of the worst times of the last 10 to 15 years to sell into talent teams. Every talent team that I know over the last 18 months has been in a cutting cycle. They're cutting headcount, they're cutting software. What are you seeing on the ground, given that, you are in the trenches on the front lines talking to these people? Like, how is it going out there?
We're part of another super cycle, right? There's definitely an AI super cycle going down. I think it is literally, I think it is the responsible thing for leaders to do. And I mean, executive company leaders, I also mean talent, like the people that are doing the talent function. The responsible thing to do is to create familiarity with what AI can do for you. So point being, we're growing really well. So we're not being, I can't wait for the market to be more of a tailwind, because then I can't believe how fast we'll be growing then. And that would be amazingly fun. But right now we're seeing a lot of appetite, especially around anything that's connected to efficiency and quality of hire. So there is, even though obviously, you folks will know this, the cuts that have been happening, in massive spikes and still off and on are happening now, they are over indexing on the talent team. on the recruiting team, I should say. But there's still hiring happening in a lot of those companies. So you actually have the sort of the ratio of hires expected per recruiter has in many cases gone up. And so there is this efficiency drive. And at the same time, because people are still pretty sore from having to, if you're a head of TA, you may have just laid off half of your recruiting team in the last 18 months that you spent ages recruiting. You're pretty reluctant about going back and hiring more people. And so being able to reapportion budget to, listen, we're going to level up as a team. We're going to be the most efficient team we can. And when you compare the cost of software, of course, to hiring a new recruiter, even, it's night and day. So I think there's a lot of the trends are actually pretty favorable for an AI company right now, especially if you're one that's predominantly focused on helping humans do more with less, because that's what everyone's under pressure to do. What I meant about the AI supercycle, to be clear, was there is also a bunch of companies out there who literally have a mandate, which is we should be trying out AI tools. And so you'll hear a lot in the AI industry, you'll hear a lot about companies who actually grow really quickly because people want to try it out. And then they have a really big churn problem because it doesn't solve the problem. Maybe to your point at the top of the call, Nolan, around, hey, it's not actually affecting anything. So you see that a lot. So the great thing about that for us is actually the barrier to trying it out. And we really lean into this because you can do a free trial. You don't have to speak to any of our team if you don't want to. You can just start to use the product. The barrier to entry is really low. And then it's obviously on the product to make you stick around. And we've captured the zeitgeist enough and are solving a problem that people care about enough that they tend to stick around.
Yeah. So do you see this as potentially replacing ATSs in the future? Right now, it would be an augmentation, right, to an ATS. Do you see this? Maybe you don't know, but there's a lot of possibilities.
I don't know, but no, that's not. I don't think that's the way it's going to go. The way that I think about the future of this space is ATSs obviously serve a really important function. There's a bunch of functionality that we'd never even think of even overlapping with. So there's a bunch that they do that we don't. The behaviors that we're looking to create a home for are what I would see as the most important hiring behaviors, which are conversations with candidates, conversations between the recruiter and the hiring manager, sidebar conversation, maybe a Slack thread that pops up, when the candidate's on site and hey, how did that go? Should we dive into this next? Sending candidates through for approval for a VP that's really going to lean in because they don't fully trust you. That's really where hiring happens. And so that's what we want to create the home for, is actually the act of hiring. Can we create a home for that gives you leverage and helps you have confidence in high quality decisions and running efficient processes, as opposed to necessarily the system of record for who did we speak to when and these sorts of things. So we think much more about that stuff. So I would say more, I wouldn't obviously say we're competing with Slack and Zoom and these people. Those are the products that we see us working alongside and ingesting that and turning that into intelligence to help people with the actual act of hiring, which I think is a little bit different to what most ATSs are focused on, which is a tool that's really only used by recruiting, whereas we want to be the tool that's used by the whole hiring team. And just a lot of time, an analogy we use, I don't know how sort of familiar and listeners to this will be with this analogy, but we'll give it a go anyway, is one of the things that story goes, one of the things that Figma, which is obviously a really popular cloud design tool, the story goes that they actually struggle to raise a bit of money because people are like, well, how many designers run a company, right? You're a 1,000-person company where you're going to have 25 designers, you're going to sell 25 seats to a small enterprise company. That sounds like a terrible business. When of course that's not really what design is about. Actually, everyone cares about design. So even if you take Metaview, we're a 20-person company. We have 2 designers in the team. We have 20 Figma seats because everyone cares about design. And I think hiring has a lot of the same characteristics. Does anyone outside of recruiting care about the ATS? No. Do people outside of the recruiting team care about who are hiring a hell of a lot? So I think if we can become a tool that really helps those people, as well as the recruiters do a great job at hiring, then that's more where that's the direction we want to build into. And I think that's more suited as well to, I guess, these new capabilities that we have all of a sudden.
And my last comment on that is just to underline something you said that I think is really important, is you said the moment where hiring happens. This is where that happens. And you said something earlier, Siadhal, which is, right, thinking like a PM, right? Product managing these things. And I think we've been talking about this for years now, but every function, whether it be HR, marketing, finance, we all need to think product led better, and what that experience is viscerally and where things happen for people in that experience. And so I love that you're taking your PM hat and putting it onto an HR process, because a lot of HR leaders now and teams are being pushed to think more like PMs when they think about the experience.
The other thing that you mentioned, which really sticks out to me, is there is this mandate right now from leadership teams to understand how to deploy AI effectively in your organization. And I get pinged literally once a week. And that's why I've kind of been on this crusade to understand like what products actually exist. And I love your take on two things, which is just like, one, like, Metaview can be that answer, or at least part of that answer for a talent team. And number two, the barrier to entry is like, come try the product. So are you saying like people, like, and by the way, tell us where people can find you. And then did you just mention that people can test the product without like having to make a long-term commitment?
Yeah. So yeah, Metaview.ai is the website. So check it out over there. And yeah, I mean, literally, if you go and check it out now and you've got an interview starting in 5 minutes time, you can be set up and good to go. It obviously won't have, or if they won't be integrated with your ATS and things like this. But in terms of just understanding the raw impact of like the release valve that is, oh damn, I never have to take notes during my interviews again, you'll experience that. So yeah, that's where folks should go to check that out. Obviously, if you want to ping us or a member of the team, there's ways to get in contact too, and we can give you a bit more of a deep dive demo. And there's increasing, as you can imagine, I talked about some of the examples of how you can sort of pull out aggregate level data from the tool. Those things are obviously a little bit more involved. It's worth talking to us about that if you want to explore that.
And then just give us a taste of what's next on the roadmap. Like, what are you guys thinking about next, and what are the big stones that you're turning over in product?
Very quality and accuracy focused. Actually, to your question earlier on, Kelly, that's like a never ending. Like, the better and better we can be about the quality and accuracy of the notes, whether that's through leveraging new versions of LLMs that are coming out, or whether it's through fine tuning on our end. So that's like almost like it's like an invisible but constant cost that we want to pay, and pay as much of that as possible. So that's like probably worth mentioning. That's really important. And that affects downstream, that affects everything else, right? If you want to have good, high quality, aggregate level reporting on your conversational insights, you need to actually be pulling out the data originally correctly. So accuracy is essentially something we'll continue to focus on, but you don't really see that in the product. It just gets better and better over time. The other one is collaboration. So I think partly because of how we came at this problem, which was relatively, we came at it, 5 6 years for recruiters now. So I feel like I know them pretty darn well. I've definitely done my 10,000 hours, but, also have that hiring manager hat and really know that relationship is so important. The recruiter hiring manager relationship. How do we, based on this really high quality, rich data, how do we enable them to have much better collaborations and get much more calibrated much more quickly? Is a big focus as well. So just to put some specifics on that, right now people can pull out clips from interviews and share them with hiring managers in order to collaborate in that way. And it's great. People love it. It's a little bit manual. We think there's some really smart ways we can help people almost as part of their standard pack after each interview, have highlights ready to go based on what we know is either the thing they've shared in the past or the thing they've told us is the most important thing for this person, or just through queries the hiring manager has, they can get this really low latency sort of feedback that's essentially from the recruiter. It's just the AI is doing it on your behalf. So that's a really important area for us. And then the third is the aggregate level, which I think we've got a really powerful reporting product. And frankly, we can make it easier to walk up to and get the knowledge out of. Right now, we really lean in on the customer success side where we help you get the most out of this data. That's our MO, that's our mode of operation, because it means that we learn how people want to use the product through actually like sitting down desk side with them and going through it. But I think now we're at the point where we can actually turn that into something that people could walk up to and get the insight out of that they want, without necessarily having to speak, for us to desk side with them.
I love it. Thank you so much, Jay. I feel like this technology will be it's got to be table stakes at some point, right? Fast forward a certain number of time if you don't have right. So I think that it's awesome. Thank you.
I think it's there in like 6 months. Like, it's just like, if you're not using stuff like this in 6 months, you're going to be behind. So Siadhal, thanks so much for building, and thanks so much for your time today.
Well, thanks so much, guys. Awesome conversation. Really appreciate it.
HR Heretics is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Econ 102, Moment of Zen, and Turpentine VC. Subscribe, 5 stars, share it on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, all the things.